Hi, Bible study counter friends. I have been reading through and keeping up with many of the posts that you have been posting, the questions, the comments, interactions that we've been sharing on a week-to-week basis. And I really want to pour into you today because many of you have commented about how this study is changing you, how this study is helping you to rethink some things and to really look at where you are, what patterns are in your life, and how God is pouring into you. And so today I really want to talk about how we can thrive through those transitions because really in life, change is inevitable. The question isn't whether or not change will happen, but the question is what you'll do when change happens. So how can you thrive through change instead of simply surviving? So when I think of moments of change or periods of transitions, I often find myself holding my breath, which immediately leads to tension. So before I get too uptight, I remind myself to breathe, to settle. As I heard someone say this weekend, sit in the pocket. So I was at a dance convention recently where different age levels are in different large conference ballrooms throughout the hotel. And usually those rooms are back to back with wall dividers. So then at the end of the conference, the walls are collapsed and everybody joins together for the big farewell show. Well, I was sitting in my daughter's room in a row of chairs that were sitting against that temporary wall. And as the music from our room and the room behind me started, the floor, that temporary wall, and my chair began to shake. Now, it wasn't just a little vibration. This was a bounce. I looked at the mom sitting close to me with Starbucks in her hand, and I thought, one thing is certain, her drink will stay well shaken. But at the height of that shaking, the chandeliers in the room were bouncing up and down. And good thing they weren't glass or crystal. I think someone had thought that through when designing the room. But I had a choice. I could tense up and be jarred by the bouncing, or I could relax and go with it. Our bodies are actually made to absorb shock, but we have to trust our bodies in order to absorb that shock. You've likely heard those warnings about bracing yourself from a fall or putting your straight arms out in front of you against the dashboard when you slam on the brakes. And that was even more common before seatbelt laws. My mom's right arm still occasionally flies across the passenger side of the front seat when she has to slam on the brakes. Of course, attempting to relax instead of bracing yourself isn't a guarantee against all injury. You'll likely still get bumped and bruised. And the same can be said about transitions. Bracing yourself for transitions is similar. The transition might be rougher on you when you brace and you tense. But tensing in anticipation or in preparation is really our natural response. We're surprised, we're caught off guard, and we naturally and very quickly respond. But our response or our reaction can be severe, more severe than is warranted for the situation, and severe enough to create a tension that when that impact hits, we're more severely injured and traumatized. So in the tension, we can feel that jar even more. We can end up exposing ourselves to breaks instead of bumps and bruises. So back to the dance convention. I could let every beat and jolt jar me, but here's the thing about disruptions, specifically in this case with the music. There's a rhythm to it, and as uncomfortable and not my style that it is sometimes, I could choose one, to feel every beat as dissonance and really feel that tension, or two, I could get into a rhythm of the beat, as jarring as it was. Now, focus was going to be difficult either way, just as it is in transitions, but when I felt the beat as jarring and dissonant, focus was really next to impossible. When I began to feel the rhythm and settle into it, I could set some of the jarring effects aside to regain a bit of focus. And really, that's the best tip. To thrive through transitions is focus. So what are you focusing on? How distracted do you get by the turmoil of what's going on around you? It's definitely easy to get distracted and disoriented, but your focus greatly impacts the transition and how you come through it. You don't need to change your focus once you're in the transition. We feel the focus changes because of all the distractions around us, but if we're careful, if we're intentional, it's not so much our focus that changes, but the intensity of the focus. And our focus is or should be God. So where are we, or where are you in relation to God's will? As you continue this study and things are changing within you and you're really starting to redefine things, are you getting caught up in that change, that tension of the change? Or are you sinking into it, sitting in the pocket and going with it, even though it's uncomfortable? Because it is uncomfortable at times. It's uncomfortable to grow and be challenged. But here's the thing. Through all of these changes, God does not change. Where he is doesn't change. His character doesn't change. Now, we experience our position with him differently, but it's not because he's changed. It's because our perspective of him and his position changes. Our position changes, and so our perspective changes, but God doesn't change. Because this change or transitions are disorienting, they can very easily make us feel like we're somewhere we're actually not. But we need to be realistic in our perspective and the reality of where we are and where our focus is. And we need to be realistic and recognize change will happen. It might still be jolting, but if we practice some tools of relaxing through it and focusing on God through it, we might help take out just a touch of that jolting. And we might be surprised by the timing of something, but if we're surprised that it happens at all, we're naive, because change is going to happen. That beat might be dissonant to you of what's going on, but there is a rhythm to it. The transition or the change might seem vastly different for you, but there's a rhythm to life and change. God is an orderly God. Even when we can't make sense of the order, we can trust, relax, and trust the internal shock absorber system that he gave us to weather the jars and the jolts. So my challenge to you and my encouragement to you this week is to focus. Focus on God, on his character, on his word, and on his will for your life, which is exactly where you need to be. Listen to him, trust him, and step out in obedience, because when you are in obedience, you are right where he wants you to be for that moment, even if you don't completely understand, even if you don't completely get the big picture. We often don't. Settle into the pocket, sit in the pocket, and get into that rhythm that he has for your life. And I'm trusting him to do that for you this week. God's blessings, my friend.